Our next speaker, Nico. Wow, Nico. We started this internal Slack channel where we're keeping track of a lot of the things going on in Ukraine, and Nico has been posting so many useful tidbits of information all along the way. I am a closet. Everyone thinks that they're amazing at open source intelligence. I am not. I look at the stuff that Nico has been bringing forward and saying, look at this over here. Look what this picture's showing. And I'm floored. And Nico's also been a huge help to many people on the ground in the Ukraine, trying to help get people to the border in the initial onset of the war. So Nico is without a doubt, keeping his eyes, trained on a daily basis to what's going on. He's one of the ones I think Kevin was referring to. Make sure you get some sleep. So I don't know if he's been sleeping or not. Definitely does not look like it. But Nico, let's find out about how we debunk all the disinformation stuff that's coming out.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And yes, indeed. When Kevin noticed you need some sleep, I was like cringing a little bit because, well, I had some lack of sleep, but I made sure that I had enough. Let's talk a little bit about what I have been seeing from an open source intelligence perspective on what has been going on with the Ukraine-Russian war. And I've been seeing a lot of things, people trying to geolocate where bombs are falling, where people trying to flee. But this talk of mine will be purely geared toward what I would like to call disinformation, fake news, psychological operation, PSYOPS. So anything that has to do with getting you a certain narrative in your mind that they want you to believe. And with they, I mean basically people. It's not always certain who is responsible for that certain narrative. But I think the most important part is, particularly in this information war that is ongoing, so we see a physical war, kinetic war, but I can see mostly on the internet a war that is all about weaponized lies. When you look at this picture, that's basically telling exactly what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of information being posted on the various social media, so Western social media, Russian-oriented social media, and anything in between that has a certain narrative that wants you as a reader, a consumer of information, to believe that certain narrative. And it doesn't always mean that it's 100% false or 100% fake. There may be some truth to it. But I think the most important part in this digital information age, in this particular war, is if you look at the information and simply do not assume anything and doubt everything that you see. The first 3-4 days after the Russians entered Ukraine, we've seen a lot of propaganda go out, which came from, well, it looked like it came from trusted sources because they were well-known sources. Doesn't always mean that those known sources are the ones that we can trust. So that's something that is really important for you to understand when we are looking at information that's being thrown at us. Now, I've also seen information from, let's say, the cyber threat intelligence perspective, where certain groups are sharing a certain narrative that wants you to believe that, for example, a certain Russian hacking group is not responsible for that power grid attacks. Or they say, hey, we found evidence that another nation state is trying to make you believe that we are behind it. So again, do not assume anything. If you want to go to the next slide, please. I think it's important for you all to know that almost every piece of disinformation and fake news is crafted, and it's crafted in a certain process. And when we take a look at this particular slide that we now see up on our screen, that in 9 out of 10 times, and of course this is not always the case, but in 9 out of 10 times, you will see that there is a form of leadership when it comes to crafting a certain message with a certain narrative. And that could be a nation or a nation state. It could be a specific group. It could be some digital forces that are backed by a nation state. It could be a group of individuals that team up for a specific greater good. For example, if you support your country, you may now form a group and then you spread that message. What you then see when that's basically that closed environment that's very hard for people like me to get into. So it's hard to find the people who are coming up with the ideas to spread a certain piece of disinformation. That's that closed ecosystem, their own little echo room. Then it starts to spread through agencies and proxies that they have direct access to. 9 out of 10 times that will be either official media or unofficial media. That's where they maybe send out a message that looks like a brand new 8 o'clock breaking news message. Hey, we found certain evidence that there is chemical warfare going on. We find certain piece of information that there is a certain type of bomb being used by the Ukrainians or vice versa. So they use that as a form of a springboard to get that information into channels. And those channels can basically be the places where I think the vast majority of internet users will be at. That's on social media. So from the Russian VKontakte, Odiklanevsky, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it, they will spread the information that they crafted there, or it gets picked up by people who are already, let's say, believers of a certain narrative because they have been molded throughout the years with that specific propaganda narrative. And then we will see a thing happening where we see a fairly large group of real accounts, so people like you and me spreading that narrative, and we see a lot of fake accounts. So accounts that are their sole purpose is to spread a certain piece of information, making it look like they are real humans, but they are not, which I will get into in just a moment. And we will see then by itself that information being picked up by smaller web pages or news outlets that are, let's say, not always that official, that pick up that news and then it gets spread to their audiences. And with that, it reaches the target. And the targets are, let's say, the unknowing or unalerted people that are not doubting everything. So it could be you and me, citizens, normal citizens of any country around the world, particularly in this war. I can see a lot of information being deliberately targeted at all the countries around the world because they want you and me to believe that their goal to enter Ukraine is valid. So that's a way. We can see politicians pick it up. This morning, I saw a Dutch politician that's part of the European Parliament literally saying, hey, Ukraine started this war. They have the Assad regime and they are part of the World Economic Forum. So it's totally legitimate that Russia enters Ukraine. And with that, again, they are spreading a certain narrative, a certain piece of disinformation. And in this case, this is a politician. It has a little verified tick on his Twitter account. So people trust those accounts. People believe what those people are saying. So we can see the same thing going on with people who are known as influencers. Influencers are particularly being targeted to spread a certain piece of information. And they do not always check like information like I would check it. They do not doubt everything. So if we go to the next slide, I want you to show a picture that I think tells a great story that was made by the company Miburo that shows you the Russian disinformation and propaganda ecosystem. And we can see that on the top part that those intel agencies have their own news outlets. And these outlets have all been fact-checked and validated for spreading forms or a form of disinformation and fake news in the past years. But more deliberately, more recently, we saw an increase of information coming from those outlets. Does not always mean that these outlets and these news agencies spread disinformation and fake news 24/7. There's also just normal plain news that is correct or not falsified or has a specific narrative. But it's good to know that some of these outlets have a direct connection to certain intel groups. They have, let's say, some say in what information is being spread. We can see that there are Kremlin-associated news outlets. And then by themselves may also be connected to those Russian oligarchs that we have been seeing in the news with those large ships being confiscated because they own basically all the money in Russia. And if you own the money, you own the news agencies. You own the narrative that needs to be spread by Mr. Putin, for example. We can see certain amplifiers that are, again, Kremlin-orientated or Kremlin-minded, supportive of. And of course, we can see the overt media that is, Russia Today, Rupert Lee, those are those outlets that look real credible and do sometimes spread, let's say, normal, not falsified or disinformation news. But we can also see that they have that certain agenda, that certain way of looking at Mother Earth and spreading information with only a certain goal. And we can also see that a lot of news outlets in Europe, for example, have banned certain news outlets from airing on their senders in real time. So there's a lot of information going on. Keep in mind that this information is not only in the Russian language. We can see these pieces of information being shot at all of us within my native language. So Netherlands, Dutch, we can see French, German, we can see, of course, in English, we can see Polish, Arabic. So they really, really are making a huge effort to reach as many people as they can to start believing what they want you to believe, which is, well, not always factually true. Next slide, please. So when it comes to tackling disinformation and fake news, I strongly believe that the golden rule must be critical thinking. And it doesn't always need to be rocket science. So if we use techniques like the 5W1H, which I will get into just a moment, you will find answers to research questions that you raise to yourself once you find a piece of information. And always look rationally at the information that you find and collect without the emotions. Basically tying a little bit back what Kevin just said, that confirmation bias, those logical fallacies that we all have, that's just human nature. But you need to be aware of them at all times, particularly looking at disinformation and fake news. So always check the source. Where is this information coming from? Where did it originate? Who else is reporting on this piece of information? Is it just only one channel? Or are there multiple channels that are trusted and well known that are spreading that same message? Examine the information itself. Look for details that may be a tell or maybe confirming to you, hey, this may be true or not. And when there is footage to be found, so either images or videos, you want to check them making certain techniques, for example, reverse image searching or analyzing the picture with visual analysis, looking at the foreground, background, looking for certain details that may help you understand where this picture was taken, at what certain moment in time, and so on and so on. Next slide, please. So when it comes to critical thinking and those 5Ws1H, in essence, when you find something, when you find a piece of information that pops up on your Twitter timeline, on your Facebook timeline, on your vKontakte timeline, basically anything, or on a news site that you love to read every morning when you're having your first cup of coffee, you will basically have a piece of information that, well, you should not assume that the information that you're now seeing is true. So you're going to doubt that message. And basically what you can do is take those W questions. So who is spreading this message? Who else is talking about this information? What is this message about? What does it say by itself? Where is it being spread? And where is the information coming from? When was the information being spread? So is it accurate? Or is it some information that's maybe days, weeks, or years old? How is the information crafted, or how is it being spread? Does it show you something specific that you can work with? So when you look at the left-hand side of your screen now, you can see, for example, you can raise yourself questions, and this is a non-exhaustive list. When was the message first seen? So who was the first person on the internet who posted this specific message? Where did it come from? How did it originate? So patient zero, in essence. Who picked it up? Because that's important. We see a lot of people that pick up news and then spread it further through the internet ecosystem. So who are they? Are those bot accounts? Are those real people? And if they are bot accounts, what's their overall narrative? What other things have they been retweeting or resharing or talking about? Or when we talk about Facebook posts, who else is sharing it? So there's a lot of information going on here. Are those sources to be trusted? Do we know them? Do people talk about them? Are they validated or not? So there's a lot of information that we can check by simply taking a piece of information and asking ourselves questions based upon the 5W1H principle. Now, lastly, the why question, that's the hard part, because we will not always be able to figure out why a certain piece of disinformation or fake news was posted, because the only one who could answer that is the person who actually spreads that message. They can tell you exactly, hey, this is why we or I did this. So that's a question that's not always something that we can answer. Next slide, please. So what we have been seeing is a lot of copy-paste disinformation, for example. So here we have a post that has been posted on vKontakte that basically shows, and if you can click one more time, Rob, so that people can see the English translation, is that it says, hey, our president, so Putin, is doing the right thing. It's necessary for us to invade the Ukrainian country and start taking it over. They basically are spreading through semi-trusted sources for Russians a certain narrative, showing them, all the people in Russia, hey, what we are doing is legitimate. You can really trust us. This is why we are doing this. This is the truth. And we can see that a lot of these outlets that are really trusted by a lot of Russian people or Russian-speaking people will consume that information as true. But what I'm seeing from an open source intelligence perspective is that these are outlets that are related to the outlets that I discussed, that disinformation and propaganda landscape. And it's literally copy and pasting. They're not even making an effort on making it unique messages. So from a open source intelligence perspective, tracking it down, once you know what keywords they're using, you can go through numerous platforms and start tracking that information and see who is spreading it, when they are spreading it, and how they are spreading it. Next slide, please. So another example that I've been seeing is a lot of spreading Z propaganda. It almost sounds like I'm German, but the Z has been coming. Well, I don't even know if I'm just going to say it. It looks like the new swastika. So the Z has been going on the internet everywhere. But we can also see that a lot of Russian accounts, so normal user accounts like you and me, but also from companies or even schools, have been spreading that propaganda that has that Z deliberately in it, telling you, hey, we believe in what we are doing. We are backing up our nation. What we are doing in Ukraine is valid. So that by itself, again, is a form of a psychological operation that has been going on within Russia itself to make the people believe that are in that country that the invasion of Ukraine and the war that has been started is completely legitimate. And we can literally see small children and at school spreading this specific narrative from an open source intelligence perspective. And this is not only limited to Russian-speaking outlets. I've seen this in my native language, in Dutch. I've seen it in German, in French, in English. I've seen it on Telegram, on LinkedIn. I've seen it on Instagram. I've basically seen examples similar to these almost everywhere on the internet. Next slide, please. So how can we detect those fake accounts? There are a lot of fake accounts on the internet, and there are some tells that you may want to be aware of. First of all, I would always suggest that you look at the profile picture, because those profile pictures can have those computer-generated faces. So when you take a look at your right-hand side of your screen now, you can see a lot of people, their faces that are, well, they look like normal people. But those people are being generated with a graphics card and calculations, for example, at thispersondoesnotexist.com, and they have some obvious tells. You can look at this example where all the pupils are aligned perfectly. We can see strange halos in hairlines. We can see weird teeth. Almost all those people are always laughing or smiling. They always have that hazy or blurry background. Teeth are, when you zoom in, and that's maybe a little bit hard to see on this slide, teeth are always a little bit weird when you look at them, when you really zoom into it. So there are a lot of tells when you look at profile pictures, people, their faces. Same counts for that header picture. Maybe that header picture is really generic, or most bot accounts or fake accounts don't even upload a header picture. So again, when we start scoring those, maybe the more points you give to, hey, strange profile picture, weird or raw header picture, again, a point. The bio description from a certain user account can be super generic because normal people will tell something about themselves 9 out of 10 times. The username on average is something that you may want to check out. Maybe someone says, my name is Nico Dekens, and you can now start looking, hey, are there Nico Dekens social media accounts on other platforms besides the platform that I'm finding this user now? Because 9 out of 10 times, those fake accounts will have a lack of presence on other social media platforms because normal people will set up multiple accounts on normal platforms. But in my personal experience, when it comes to fake or bot accounts, you will only find one on one platform. A lack of balance when it comes to following and followers or friends and befriended accounts, because normal people know normal people, real people, and they will follow each other. Of course, when people are famous, there will be a little bit of a disbalance or more well-known, but on average, when it comes to bot account and fake accounts, you will see that disbalance. The account creation date, we have seen a huge amount of increase on Twitter just around half February when it comes to fake accounts on Twitter. But I've seen a similar thing on Instagram. And I know all these platforms are really trying to tackle and prohibit those fake accounts from entering their platforms, but it's really hard for them to do. When it comes to fake accounts, some of them seem to be always online. Just like Kevin said, hey, we need some sleep every now and then. But those bot accounts, they are automated. So you will see online presence 24/7, 365. That by itself could again be a tell that you're looking at a fake account. When it comes to Russian fake accounts, I can see that some of them, definitely not all, but let's say roughly around 40 or 50% show some strange sentence structures or wording when they are spreading certain messages, when they are posting information. Because 9 out of 10 times, things will be typed out in Russian Cyrillic letters and they will be translated through online translating tools in another language. And that's not always that accurate. So that again, that could be a tell for you that you are dealing with a fake account spreading a certain narrative or a piece of information. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a recent one where you see a deep fake. And honestly, when you look at this, I think almost everybody in the audience today will now immediately see that there is something weird going on with President Zelensky talking in this video. His voice looked, when you listen to it, and I stopped the audio here just because otherwise you cannot hear me, really sounded like Zelensky. But when you look at this, the neck is strange. You can see that there's a lot of blinking going on, and that's very specific for deep fakes. We can see that the way the corners of the mouth move, they move a little bit unnatural. So there are some obvious tells that you may be dealing with a deep fake or staged video. I think they could have taken a little bit more effort here, but still, this is what we're dealing with. And there were actually people in Ukraine that trusted this message. They really thought that this was their president addressing them, telling them to lay down their arms and surrender. So this is the real deal. This has been going on. Next slide, please. So we have been talking a lot about social media, but there are still websites out there. And I know that websites are slowly going away more and more, and it has become more and more social media for the vast majority of internet users. But when it comes to those nation state-backed propaganda websites or news outlets that I started my talk with, we can try and look for, hey, does social media drive traffic to those websites? And why do they want us to click on those URLs? Why do those Twitter posts or Instagram posts or Snapchat videos want us to take a look at those web pages trying to spread a certain message? So that by itself could be interesting for you. Fact check trusted sources that are well renowned, that if they already know about this domain or this news outlet, always, and this is something that I would always encourage you to do, simply check out the About page. because the About page or the About Us or Contact Us page will tell you a lot about where the company is coming from, where the web page is coming from, maybe who are working at the company. Maybe they will leave behind a phone number or email address, which you can do reverse lookups upon, just to check, does this check out? The lack of having an About page, especially if you're pretending to be an official news outlet, for example, could be a tell that you're dealing with something that has a certain narrative or certain agenda to provide you with falsified or disinformation. Also, when it comes to these web pages, try to look out for, is this particular article or news video trying to get me into a certain emotional state? Does it play into my emotions? Is it biased? Does it only tell one narrative? Because there's always two sides of a story, and there's never just one side. Does it cite its sources? So where's the information that this news outlet or website is talking about, or this blogger is talking about? Where did the information come from? Can we check their sources? Is the domain name or the top level domain name, is it a legit one, or is it some shady one that is in the Seychelles, for example? And lastly, what you can do is look within the source code of a page by simply right-clicking on that page, looking for the source code, and look for an analytics code, because the analytics code may lead you, by doing a reverse lookup, to other places that use that same analytics code, and then you may be able to find more pages that are related to the one that you are looking that are spreading that same narrative. Next slide, please. So this one was briefly touched upon already by Kevin, and this is again one form of disinformation being spread on a Ukrainian official news outlet. So some hackers hacked the ticker on the lower part on the screen in a live news broadcast, and the ticker literally said, "Hey, I am the president. Dear Ukrainians, dear defenders, being the president was not easy. I have to make a difficult decision." So basically, he's telling the people, which is not true, that, hey, he wants you to surrender. He wants the people of Ukraine to surrender. He's giving up. He advises them to lay down their weapons. And again, this is a form of disinformation. This is psychological warfare by hacking a ticker from an official, trusted news outlet, Ukraine 24. People watch that all the time. So again, by validating that information, so who else is reporting on this? Is this only this news outlet reporting on it, or are other? Because I can only imagine if Zelensky really wants to surrender, that will go viral over the entire internet. Every other major news outlet will first of all try to validate the accuracy of that information. And this was only one news outlet, an official news outlet, but the ticker on the lower part of the screen was hacked. But we could validate that piece of information. Next slide, please. Now, here we have another example of critical thinking. We have two Twitter accounts that seemingly look the same from your first glance at it. But when we take a closer look and we look at the left-hand side of your screen, we can see that it says Olena Zelenska, so the president's wife. We can see a joint in March 2022. That's fairly recent. For a president's wife, maybe that could be a strange tell, pointed out at two. And when we pointed out at one on the left-hand side, you can see that there's only 50 followers and only 14 followers. So that could be, there may be some tells, but it looks like her, it looks like President Zelensky, it looks to be the real deal just from the first glance. Now, when we took a look at the right-hand side, we can see that there pointed out at 4, it's a protected account. So it means that you can only become a friend when see her timeline when she accepts you as a friend. We can see that there is a born date pointed out at 3. So the user in this case provided it with official information. We can see a joint date, which is older, so maybe a little bit more plausible. And when we look at, well, this being a president's wife, I can only assume that that person may have, well, a couple of dozen, if not thousands and thousands of followers. So that by itself could be something that you may want to take a look at. So it may be that the person on the left-hand side of the screen maybe a disinformation or a false account, a fake account. So if we go to the next slide, we can do something different, because what happened here, when we grab those usernames from those accounts, we can see that there was a thing done called typo squatting in essence. This is also very common with phishing campaigns and domain takeovers. But what they've done here is they use that lowercase l that looks like that capital I and vice versa. So it looks like there was Olena Zelenska, but in essence, it said Olenska Zienska. And that, again, someone was very smart and crafted an account that looked like the president's wife, but just changing one character that looks like an L, but is in fact a capital I. And here in this case, I used GHQ CyberChef just to make sure if I convert those usernames to uppercase with a different font type, I could make those differences a little bit more clear to you. Next slide, please. So how can we examine images? So images could be just an image that was posted, or we can examine images within videos or stills from videos. Always when you find a piece of footage, being a video or a picture, look for the context. So someone posts a picture or a video with what narrative, what kind of message are they trying to spread? Then what can you look for? You can look for, hey, has this picture been altered, manipulated, or edited in a form? Just by looking at doing side-by-side comparisons, by doing, for example, reverse lookups, which I will talk to about in just a moment. Maybe we can see if the content in the footage was staged. Are we dealing with fakes or deepfakes, just like we have seen with President Zelensky telling his people to surrender? Sometimes we will find a correct video, so a video that shows footage that actually happened, but the narrative that's being spread is wrong. So you grab a piece of footage maybe from months or years ago, and you make it look like something happened in the now, for example. And always try to reverse image search the footage that you find, just to make sure you can see where this information has been indexed and stored elsewhere on the internet. Next slide, please. So when it comes to reverse image searching, it can be really straightforward. You can just go to images.google.com, bing.images, yandex.images, and you grab or download a picture, or you provide it with the URL that has that file extension, JPEG or PNG in it. You upload it, and those search engines will look within their index if they find a piece of footage that you uploaded. So here we have an example that shows that it was posted on Twitter, where someone says, a friend of mine who is in the Ukraine army, is a Ukraine army veteran, sent this picture to me. So that first sentence, for me, immediately could be a trigger for people that are, well, not well invested in this subject. Because, hey, if someone is an army veteran, they may be knowing what they are talking about. So with that, for some people who are reading this message, their trust goes up. They start to believe, hey, it's an army veteran sharing information with his friend. So this may be true. It's a picture of a Topol M, a Russian atomic long-range rocket launcher, spotted heading for Moscow, Ukraine. It has that Z on it. So it appeared to be that was the real deal. So how can we try and validate if this is true or not? Well, sometimes we can simply reverse image search that picture, but sometimes that will not work. Sometimes we need to crop a specific area, because there may be too much noise on that picture. Or we need to flip or mirror the picture to tell those reverse image search engines exactly what we are looking for. Maybe we want to blur out those unwanted parts, but when we blur out those unwanted parts, it still keeps that color scheme that those search engines and that artificial intelligence and machine learning from Google and Bing needs to interpret the picture that you want to reverse image search. Look for text in pictures, because that can lead you to a geolocation, for example. Look for temporal information. That again could lead you into a specific area of the world or a specific geolocation. Sometimes you will find metadata. Now, on most social media platforms, the metadata is corrupt and strict. But on news outlet pages or on, maybe on Telegram, you will find metadata that could tell you something about the date and timestamp when the picture was crafted or took by a certain camera, sometimes even GPS coordinates. So there can be really valuable information interpreted from that metadata. And again, do not forget to use that 5W1H. So who's posting this? Where is it? Where is he posting it? What is it about? What's the narrative? What are they trying to achieve here? Now, if we go to the next slide, I will try to break down how can we find more information about this Topol and rocket launcher. So what I did here was no rocket science. I simply did a reverse image search in Google, Yandex, and Bing. So 3 search engines. Why am I not sticking to one? So I do not know how well indexed the internet is. So sometimes you will find results in Google that are not to be found in Yandex, or vice versa. Or you find things in Bing that are to be found in neither one of the other ones. So you always want to exhaust your resources if you have them available for you. When you look for a picture, in this case, that presumed nuclear missile launcher, you look for the exact same footage. So exactly the same picture or similar looking footage, because it could be coming from a video. And now you have a similar looking picture, let's say 3 seconds further in the video, or maybe 5 seconds further. It still shows the rough same location, but just a different angle. Maybe look only for similar parts. And more importantly, you want to look for maybe some unique details in a picture. In this case, that specific scene maybe, that could be super unique for that specific moment in time. Next slide, please. So here I tried to break it down. I did a reverse image search and I found several pictures that looked exactly the same. But interestingly, almost 90% of the pictures that I found did not contain that Z pointed out at A. So maybe that was Photoshopped, edited afterwards in that footage. When we look at the rest of the details, they all seem to match up and align. We can see those lampposts pointed out at 2 and 3, exactly the same. Pointed out at 6, a small box at that lamppost. We can see the tail lights, the brake lights being lit up at the exact same moment. So most likely this footage was taken at the exact same time. We can see those small little lines in those center bollards, pointed out at 5. The street lining, pointed out at 4. We can even see a part of the car where the person most likely was sitting in while they took that picture, pointed out at 1. So again, by doing that side-by-side comparison and an analysis, we can say, hey, this is the same location, the same Topol M rocket launcher, but almost all pictures that we find on the internet do not have that Z in it. Now, if you dig in further and you start looking at the details, you will find out that this footage is coming from a Topol M rocket launcher that was actually driving in Russia, but back in 2018, preparing for a military parade. So again, they took old footage, they reused it, they edited it with a certain disinformation to spread a certain narrative to make you and I believe that they are getting ready their rocket launchers or their Topol M nuclear missiles. Next slide, please. So to close it off, all the sources that we gather must be analyzed for reliability. So do not trust your news outlets. Do not trust the social media by default. So doubt everything. So we analyze basically 2 parts. With those 5W1H, we look at the source. And if we can try and find answers based upon the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, the why, we do the same thing for the source and the content. And maybe use a reliability technique like ANCH, analysis of competing hypothesis, admiralty scoring, you name it. There are numerous ones just to stress test what you have found. And with that, I would like to thank you for my part when it comes to open source intelligence and try to debunk the disinformation and fake news in this horrific ongoing war in Ukraine. Thank you.